Welcome First Gen to our 5-point GenPay presentation audio training. What this training is designed to do is to get you motivated and engaged in learning the presentation. Folks, we wonder all the time where we go wrong at in this business, and typically it's because we don't have enough people to see, or if we end up having people to see, if we're fortunate to have people to see, and where somebody gives us an opportunity to explain the importance of our products and services to them, our delivery mechanism is off and we don't really know how to lead people through the sales process. And so what we decided to do was to get with some of the great minds in the industry and put together this 5-point GenPay presentation. And just so you know the history of why this is called the GenPay presentation is because this is what's going to increase your GenPay, your generational pay, your residual checks. The more of these presentations you're able to give, the better you're able to get at doing the presentations, the bigger your check. So we really want you to take some time to go through this and utilize this audio as a guide so that way you can learn to become fluent as yourself. And keep in mind that it takes a little time, it takes a little practice. You have to spend time with it. You can't look at it the first time or the second time and just think you're going to be a professional at it. That's the reason why we wanted to do this audio before the video clip, so that way you can utilize it during drive time university. You can just plug it in, maybe listening to it in your car, listening to it while you're working out. The more you're able to get it inside of you, the more it'll be apt to come out of you. So what we want to do is just focus on the 5 points today. I'm going to be spending some time going through each one of these points and talking about your transitions that you need to be making with the client, okay? So point number 1 that we call it here, let's jump right into it, is setting the stage. And so you'll know what setting the stage is to establish yourself as a person of credibility with the client. You never want to get in front of a client and not establish the credibility, but it also sets the stage for you to gain control of the process. One of the biggest things is when you sit in front of somebody and you give the person on the other side of the table the control in the beginning. And so this setting the stage is going to be very critical for you to go through this information as close as you can. Now, I always say that you may not say every word verbatimly, but you need to be as close as you can to the verbiage and the wording that we have in this presentation, so you can get the results that you're looking for. So if I was had the opportunity to get in front of a client and I'm sitting in front of Miss Jones, okay? So Miss Jones is going to, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, either one will be our clients for today. Okay, so I get to Mrs. Jones or Mr. Jones' house, and it was by way of a lead, and the lead got me to the home, led me to them. So I'm there, I'm able to get in, and so now I'm sitting at the table or the preferred place to do business. Most of the time, you want that to be at the kitchen table. Sometimes in our market, it might be on the front porch, it might be somewhere in the living room, but wherever there's a place for you to really kind of get your presentation and then transition into the application process, which we're going to talk about later. But I'm at the table now, setting the stage with Mr. or Mrs. Jones. And it goes, Mr. and Ms. Jones, I just want to explain my role and purpose of what I want to accomplish here today. What that means to you is I'm a field underwriter. So in other words, what that really means is I work with the best companies to find you solutions. I'm not exclusive to any one company, but I am exclusive to you and your family, and I'm here to talk to you all about the process itself, just so you will know how it works. I will also talk a little bit about your finances and plans you already have in place, because this might be something that you don't need at all, or we may discover that you need a lot less than you thought you did, and I'll be the first person to tell you that if that's the case. I'm going to talk to you also a little bit about your health. I'm not going to get evasive. I'm just going to make sure that whatever carrier we look at, it's our goal to get you approved for the coverage and not get you a denial. We will also be taking the application today and sending it up to our senior underwriting team. It typically takes about 5 days once submitted and first premium collected before your policy is mailed out to you. However, the good news is, as your field underwriter, chances are I may be able to get you a policy number when I submit the application here with you today. So your job is to help me to help you. We all have a budget. I know I do. I'm sure you do also. I'm sure even your neighbor down the street has a budget. So I want to make sure that whatever we look at here today suits the needs, it's going to suit the budget, and we'll make sure the two fit together. Sounds good, Mr. Jones, Ms. Jones? Okay, great. So after you set the stage, folks, you want to take some time to kind of go through that, because it's going to start knocking out a lot of the things that they're already curious about. They're going to want to know how the process is going to work. They're going to know what kind of questions you're going to be asking. You need to go ahead and just kind of let them know, in setting the stage, how the lay of the land is going to work with this process today. And I think spending about 2 minutes or so doing that in the beginning will help give them a clear picture of the direction that you're going. And then it sets you up for the point number 2, which is the interview process. Now, we don't want to call this interview process the interview process to the client, but we know that it's an interview because this is where we're finding out the information that we need. You know, we may have known this to be in some of our other methods of doing business as the pre-screening process. Whatever you want to call it, however you want to associate it, this is the time where you get a chance to find out all the critical points that you need from the client, so you can know what direction that you're going to move them into. And so with the interview process, it's just a great transition. After they give you permission, after setting the stage, and you ask them, sounds good, and they tell you, yeah, that sounds good, or they may have another couple questions or whatnot, and you address those questions. Immediately get back on point to go ahead and start your interview process. And so again, the way you move right into that is by saying simply, Mr. and Ms. Jones, I'm curious, what made you begin the process for looking for either the mortgage protection or the final expense coverage? And then you give them time to answer, okay? Did something recently happen that you really started thinking about this? And once you ask those 2 questions, you really want to give the client time to answer, because getting a response from the client is going to be your permission to make it conversational, but it's also going to give you the permission that you need to move to the next question, okay? And so after they give you the responses to the question, after you give them time to answer, then you want to go into the next question, is asking, who is the person that will most likely handle your affairs, if anything? And anything means that, because of the fact that we're not only focusing on if they pass away, but if they get disabled, if they get, sick, those types of things. We don't oftentimes think about who is the person that's going to have to step up and be responsible if they're 85 years old and they can no longer take care of themselves. Who is that person that's going to handle your affairs if anything were to happen to you? And then you want to take time to get the name and the relationship of that person. And then you want to edify that person by, if they say their daughter, Karen, okay? And then I'm going to say, well, sounds like, Mr. and Ms. Jones, that Karen really means the world to you, because now your presentation is getting ready to be centered around Karen, and you're taking the emphasis off of just Mr. and Mrs. Jones, okay? So you want to make this to be about the person that they really love. If it's a husband and wife and they say each other's name, then you really want to start making that presentation about the other person, because you really want this to hit home to them. And so the next question, after you kind of find out who that person's name is on a scale of 1 to 10, how prepared mentally and financially do you believe Karen would be if, God forbid, she got the phone call today that something has happened to you? Now you're starting to tap into the emotional side. You're starting to get them to think about the burden and the process of now that loved one and what they have to deal with. And so now you're kind of capturing their heartstring. And after you get a response from the client, and the response, may be something like, I don't know, I've never thought about that. Or, man, they probably wouldn't be prepared financially. And you say, well, hey, if you could put it on a scale, what would it be? Because our goal is to maybe try to help raise that number today, or whatever the situation may be. So you want to try to get them to put it on a scale, rated, and so they can really see themselves how unprepared their loved ones may be for a situation like this. And after they give you that, then the next question that you want to move into is, have you or someone that you know experienced chaos, confusion, and conflict as a result of lack of planning and funding after losing a loved one? Or the burden of the expense if that person loses income because of sickness. So again, we're not just focusing on here in this presentation if someone passes away, but also because of the products that we have, they may be dealing with the disability factor, they may be dealing with the critical illness factor, they may be dealing with other factors, so that way we can address those concerns by seeing where they really are, of understanding the total burden that may happen if someone not only passes away, but gets sick, loses income. How are these things going to be taken care of? They have a critical illness. And so you want to ask them after that, if they say yes, then you want to get them to kind of share briefly what happened. And you want to kind of encourage them, hey, do you mind, Mr. and Ms. Jones, sharing with me what happened? How did that process go? How did it end up? You want to get them to start responding, because again, you want them really engaged in this process. And after you get that response from the client, then your next interview question will be, so Mr. and Mrs. Jones, I imagine that's one of the main reasons why I'm really here today, to help put some things in place that could possibly help ease that type of burden for Karen. Or maybe, if nothing else, just to leave a nice legacy nest egg to your loved ones. Now, what is that question doing? It's doing one of two things. It's also covering the fact that if they already have some type of insurance already in place, but maybe they're looking to leave more of a legacy. Maybe they're looking to leave a cushion, more of a cushion for their loved ones. And so you don't ever want to box yourself in a corner with just thinking that one person's motives may be just for one thing. You want to kind of open them up to understand that what we have to offer can help them with a variety of things. And so even if it's not to cover for possible needs as far as easing the burden for someone passing, but it may be that they just maybe want an extra $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 to leave as a legacy to kids, grandkids, somebody that you really love. So you want to kind of add that in there too, and then get their response to kind of know what direction you're going to be leading them into. And so after that, the next interview question is, Mr. and Ms. Jones, how's your health been overall the last few years? Are there any medications you currently take or any concerns you may have that may affect this policy at this time? And so, now you're kind of getting a gauge of where they are health-wise. You want to know basically, they start naming off a couple health concerns, and that's been doing this for a while, you kind of start getting the gauge and kind of know, okay, well, maybe that might be something we have to kind of keep our eye on. But more or less, the medications are important because, you want to kind of start listening to some of these medications and know if they're on a whole lot of medications, then you may want to find out what are they taking these medications for. And that's going to be important to where you're knowing how to transition them in to the product and the underwriting process that's going to take place. And so you want to make sure that you spend time to see if you can get the meds and get them to talk about their health concerns briefly at this point. And after you do that, you also want to find out, do they use any nicotine or tobacco products? And sometimes if they don't smoke or use the actual any tobacco products, then you want to make sure that they're not on e-cigarettes or use patches. So you want to kind of give them a memory jogger of some of those things as well, because again, those two can affect what direction you take them in as far as the product. And after they respond to that, the next interview question is, are you the primary decision maker, or is there someone else I need to be aware of that may affect us being able to move forward with this decision today? Now is here where you want to find out, okay, who's the person that's really in charge of helping you make these decisions? Are you the person? Because the worst thing that you can do is spend an hour with somebody going over a presentation and going through the information and think that you're ready to write them up, and they tell you that they can't do this without their son, they can't do it without their daughter, they can't do it without their wife, they can't do it without their husband. And so immediately you want to ask if they're the primary decision maker, and if they say they are not the ultimate decision maker, stop right there and find out who the person is and see if you can call them on three-way, or if you need to schedule another time. Do not proceed if they are not the ultimate decision maker. Now, I know that maybe some of you may be tempted to just go through the information, just to go through the numbers, but I'm telling you, you don't want to de-edify your process by moving forward if they cannot make a decision. You cannot get the time back. So reschedule another time and utilize that time to go and see somebody else that may be the decision maker, and reschedule a time when the decision maker can be there. And so after you get that response, and if you are able to move forward, then you want to ask the client, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, remember when I said earlier, I need you to help me to help you? Now is that time. What is a comfortable area for you to stay within monthly, so when it's time, I can begin looking at what I have to offer to get you the most coverage for that amount? Now, keep in mind that we don't want any problems getting that check to Karen in the event something happens to you. So it's important that you can maintain the premium monthly. Now, all I'm doing at this point is I'm not asking them to make a financial commitment. All I'm doing is trying to find out what ballpark they need to be in. I'm just trying to get an idea to get them to thinking monetarily where they need to be at. So when it's time for me, after I get through my presentation and it's time for me to start getting those numbers, I already know in my head what I'm working with because they've already kind of put out there where they are comfortable at, and I can get them as much coverage for that as possible. And then after you get that number, you might get them to say sometimes, well, I just want to know how much this X amount costs, or, 10,000, or I want to know how much 20,000 costs. And, encourage them to say, well, I can understand why you may want to know that. However, I may be able to get you for the amount that you're comfortable with. I may be able to get you more than that amount of money for what you're comfortable with. Or sometimes, we might want a certain coverage amount, but the monetarily what we willing to put in or what we might have be able to budget in monthly may not get us to that point. But we want to get you as much as possible for what you're comfortable with. And so really get them to get you that number, and don't be someone just giving out quoting face amounts, okay? You'll leave a lot of money on the table if you begin to become a face amount quoting agent. After you get that number, then you want to ask the next question, which is, or just kind of make the next statement rather. And the statement goes, typically we do the premiums electronically from your bank account each month. That's the easiest and most secure way to get this going if everything ends up being a good fit. Don't worry, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, you can pick the day each month you want this to come out, okay? So what you're doing now is finding out if they have a bank account. You want to find out if they get most of their bills done electronically. You want to find out what that comfort level is with that, so you can go ahead immediately to know that before I move to this presentation, I don't want to move forward with this presentation if they don't have a bank account. If they don't have a bank account, then I'm going to ask, well, who do you know that's responsible? Is Karen the one that maybe we need to call? Does this need to come out of her account monthly? Because this is going to be important, but you need to make sure that this is drafted. So you want to start posing some solutions, because if they don't have a bank account and they don't have a solution for one, then you want to stop the presentation because there's no need of moving forward. So these are things that's going to save you a lot of time on the back end if you really spend time in this interview process to get things going. And so to close out the interview process, the last statement or question that you want to make is, after you get the banking information, okay, sounds like we work together. We can work together on coming up with some solutions for you. Is there anything else that you feel will be helpful for me to know before I proceed with going over your options? Okay, and after they say, whatever their questions are, or if there's nothing else they need to feel that's helpful to help you to move forward, then you're able to move into point number 3. And point number 3 is when we start talking about the solution. Okay, now the solution is where you're actually going to determine at that point if they have qualified for, if you're going to qualify them for final expense, or if they're going to move into mortgage protection. Okay, this is where we start talking a little bit about the carriers or the companies, not calling one by name because we don't know which one we're going to go with yet, especially if you have a couple different options out there on the table for them. But what you want to do is edify the company. You want them to feel good about the company that you represent, okay? And so a simple way of doing that is saying, Mr. and Ms. Jones, my objective here today is to put you at ease and to ensure you that you will be placed with a financially strong, A-rated, privately held company that's not at the demand of stockholders to control raising rates on our clients. Okay, that's huge. Okay, so you want to put them at ease, let them there with a financially strong company that's going to be there to pay those claims when their family needs it the most. My goal is to get you an instant decision with one of our premier final expense or mortgage protection plans. Okay, then you want to let them know that the great thing about what I'm also able to do is offer you several benefits that will be included at no additional cost to you, depending on the product I'm able to qualify for you here today. So those benefits are the AD&D rider, the critical, chronic, terminal illness riders that's in the policies that we offer. And so you'll be able to kind of cover that later, but you're kind of giving them a heads up that they're going to get a little extra that's going to be added in at no expense to them, because that's just how we do business. And then you want to say, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, do you have any questions for me so far? Now, this is giving the client, again, another opportunity to go in and start asking some questions, okay? You want to make sure that you're keeping them engaged in the process so it doesn't become a lecture. So give them the opportunity to see if they've thought of any questions. Maybe you said something about the company, or maybe you said something about some of the benefits, and maybe they're not clear on something, or something may have popped up. So take this time here to basically make sure that you see if they have questions, and if they don't have any questions, or if they do, address those and then make the next statement. You want to make sure now that you're getting on the same page, because this is where you're really about to get into the meat and potatoes of what we do. Just to make sure we're on the same page, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, what are you looking for these funds to do for Karen? Now I'm going back to their loved one's name. Now I'm getting ready, because I'm getting ready to start talking about the product itself. I'm making sure that I'm hitting home with the loved one. And then I want to say, will this be something extra? Or would this be your primary source of funding to your loved one to take care of your affairs? Will this be the primary source of funding to Karen to take care of your affairs? Okay. Are there any specific expenses that you want to make sure are covered in the event of your loss, if we're able to make it work financially for you? So now you're trying to get specifics, and now you're saying, well, they may say, well, I want to have the bills paid off, or I want to make sure that the house is paid off, or I just want to make sure that the funeral expenses are taken care of. I just don't want to have to put the burden on anybody to make sure that I just want to be cremated. So if they're talking about, hey, all I wanted to make sure is that the funeral's paid for, and if anything's extra, the family can keep that, or I just want a cremation, or if they get more in depth by saying, well, I really want to make sure that the house is paid for. I want to make sure that they have a little money to live off of, or they have some other expenses that need to be handled. Now, based upon that, you can determine if the client will be best fit for final expense or mortgage protection. And then you can continue with the presentation that's best suited for them. And so then we have the option where you have your final expense language, and then you have the language for mortgage protection. Okay, so if it's final expense language, then the language is simply very simple language, and it goes into, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, before I get into the numbers, allow me a few minutes to explain why the planning portion of this plan I'm discussing with you is so important. Most of my clients have experience with insurance coverage at some point in their life, but very few have had the right type of planning in place. The planning guide that I'm going over with you today will be critical for Karen, so they don't have to figure out how you want everything to take place in the event of your passing. This process has helped countless families avoid the 3 C's, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, which are chaos, confusion, and conflict. Allow me to walk you through the Final Wishes booklet that we recommend you fill out immediately and get it and keep it in a safe place. And so what you want to do is have the Final Wishes guide. So if you're sitting in front of the client, you want to have a copy of the Final Wishes guide with you, and you want to take a few minutes to just highlight each page of the Final Wishes guide so they can get familiar with it. And then you want to be able to leave that guide with them. And so let them know that, hey, get this filled out as soon as possible and keep it in a safe place. And after you spend a few minutes walking through the guide, maybe asking their experience as far as things that may have happened to other family members or other processes where having this guide would have been so beneficial, it would have made the process so easy. Get them on your side talking about knowing the importance of the guide. And after you go through all of those things, then you want to ask them what the money question is. Do you believe something like this will take some pressure off of Karen? You have to make sure that you use the name, because now you have to let them know that they're not doing this for themselves, that they're doing this to take the pressure off of the loved one. And in this case, we're talking about Karen. And the client more or less will say yes. If you get anything other than a yes, folks, you need to be concerned. You need to be concerned that either you have not went through steps 1 through 3 properly so far, or you have to be concerned that maybe you're not dealing with the most responsible client that really wants to do the best that they can to make sure that they preserve the well-being of their loved one. And so hopefully you will get a yes. And if so, you say, well, great. Based on the information you helped me with earlier, let me now show you a couple of plans right around this budget that you gave me to choose from. And so once you get those plans in place and you start showing them what they have available to choose from, you want to be able to utilize the quote sheet that we have, and you want to create 3 different options. Okay, you always want to show 3 options, and you want to show something that's between something that's a little bit more something that's dead on, that's between the budget amount needed, and something that's a little bit lower, because we want to kind of draw them to the middle, okay? And now you're ready to present the three options, but you still have it in perspective as far as where they need to be as clients. And so once you turn around and say, well, Mr. and Ms. Jones, hey, I was able to kind of get you some options set up based around your budget that you said you were comfortable with on a monthly basis. So here are the three options. I have one that's a little bit over the budget. I have something that's right on the budget, and I have something that's a little below the budget. So out of these three plans here, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, which one would be the best fit for your option for you, so we can get that check to Karen? And then you be quiet. You let them decide which one, and then you allow them to circle it. Sometimes I even get them to initial it. I'm getting the commitment. And then once I get the commitment, I congratulate them on the plan that they qualify for, okay? Then I'm going to explain how their specific plan works, all of the additional benefits that we talked about, such as if it's for final expense, the quick smoking advantage plan if they're a smoker, the accidental death, the accelerated death benefit riders. So I get a chance to explain now the in-depthness of all of the things that's included in the plan that wasn't even factored into the pricing, because that's already a part of the plan anyway. Then I'm going to let them know that they get first day coverage with no physical or medical exams. You know, if it's a whole life policy, if they qualified for it, the policy cannot be canceled, can only be canceled for non-payment. That's the only way that your policy will not be enforced, if you don't pay the premiums. And then I give them some examples of how the premiums stay level. We have level premiums. We're not like companies like AARP or Colonial Penn, where our rates, they do stay the same. Some of those companies, their rates increase every 5 years, or they often have waiting periods before they go into effect. So you want to make sure that you kind of give them an example of some of the competitors and some of the things they may be seeing on television that's out there, so they're not making the wrong mistake and comparing us to those individuals. So that's how you maneuver them if they were in the final expense area. If they were going into the mortgage protection side, if you got to that point where, based upon back up to point 3, and you ask them that question, are there any specific expenses that you want to make sure that are covered in the event of your loss? If we're able to make it work financially for you, and you determine that mortgage protection is a better option, then you skip down and not go over the final expense information, but you go right into your mortgage protection spill, okay? And the mortgage protection spill is simply say, well, Mr. and Ms. Jones, let me first educate you or explain to you how mortgage protection works historically. In order for a lender to get the money to either pay off or reduce a mortgage, it was funded through a life insurance plan where the lender became the owner and beneficiary of the policy. So when the payoff came, it went directly to the mortgage company to pay down, or the mortgage company had no consideration given the spouse or children or the beneficiaries any of the proceeds. Today, there is a better way to protect your mortgage and pay your bills while giving you and your family more flexibility during a time of major life events such as a loss of income, chronic, critical, terminal illness, or the unexpected passing of a loved one. Does this make sense? And so you want to give them a little history of how mortgage protection used to be and how the change of mortgage protection is now. That's going to allow them some of those flexibilities that they didn't have at one point in time. And so when the client says that it makes sense, then you want to give them some statistics, and you want to kind of let them know that, hey, let me just run some statistics or some numbers by you so you can understand where you might fit out into this category. No one likes to think about it, but the likelihood of someone dying before paying off a 30-year mortgage is, at age 30, 1 out of 10, at age 35, 1 out of 7, at age 40, 1 out of 4, at age 45, 1 out of 3, at age 50, 1 out of 2, and after 50, we cut it off because it begins to get a little scary, okay? And so with that being said, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, there are 3 things that will typically happen to someone. They will either pass away unexpectedly, they will become sick or disabled and have reduced or minimum finances due to illness, or number 3, they will pass away and the family will not have adequate funding to cover expenses or funeral or cremation costs. Tell me, do you know of any of your family members, friends, or heard of any stories of someone who fit into either one of these categories? Now what you want to get them to do is start thinking. You want to give them time to answer here, because now if it's not them, then it's somebody that they know. And if it's not somebody they know, it's somebody that they heard about. So you want to get them to start thinking about those things and how somebody got sick and couldn't pay the mortgage and how they lost their house or how somebody passed away and they didn't have adequate funding. So you want to get them to start thinking, because now they're seeing themselves as they don't want to be in that same predicament. And then you want to ask them the question, how would this impact Karen if they were left in either of those situations? You want to give them time to answer, because now it's affecting them personally. Then you want to ask them, do you believe something in place would take some pressure off of Karen? You want to give them, again, time to answer. And then after they answer, then you can say, great, well, based upon the information you helped me with earlier, let me show you a couple of plans right around the budget you provided me to choose from. And so at that point, the situation is no different than if it was for final expense. You want to go through your process of giving them the 3 options. You want to congratulate them, and you want to kind of let them know about the additional benefits that's included in their plan. The mortgage protection that has the cashback option rider. You want to get good at explaining, being able to explain how return of premium works and the benefits of having a return of premium. For instance, if somebody has a return of premium policy, they're 40 years old now, and they get a 30-year return of term, and in 30 years the premiums can be returned if they outlive it. And just say they paid $25,000 over the 30 years into the plan, then you can let them know that, hey, when you turn 70, you can get a paid up policy or get a $25,000 check back from the insurance company, dollar for dollar, every dime that you put into it, and that can now turn into your final expense policy. So you want to be good at explaining those options. You want to talk about the living benefits. You don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but you do want to mention that it's there, the living benefits that's built in for critical, chronic, or terminal illnesses, and the accidental death benefit. So if something happens accidentally, there's going to be an additional 25 or either 50%, depending on which option you use, which is the HMS 125 or the HMS 150, that's going to be paid out, or any of our other term products that may be on the table. You'll be able to kind of explain those benefits to make sure that they understand which one they have. And so you want to be able to allow them that this policy comes without having to take any medical or physical exams, but we do use prescription checks and MIBs just to make sure we get you properly qualified. The policy cannot be canceled for non-payment, or only for non-payment. And then the premiums are level, okay? They're not gonna go up on you, they're not gonna fluctuate. And so you go through that same process, and then you're ready to move into point number 4, which is the application and underwriting. Now, at that point, after you get the numbers, after you get the commitment, now it's strictly you on your iPad, okay? It's strictly you pulling out your iPad or your laptop, whatever device you're utilizing. If you're handwriting the app, which I don't really recommend if you don't have to, but if you do have a device, you want to go ahead and write the application. Or if you have a situation where you got to go through telesales, if you've done a very thorough presentation to where now if you have to call the company to do a telesales app, they will be able to go ahead and get this verified fairly quickly, because you've done a thorough presentation, you've presented the facts, you presented the numbers, and they're ready to move forward. But never ask, can I write it? Or do you want to start it today? Always assume the sale immediately. Always assume that if you got into step 4, point number 4 with this person and they're interested, okay, you've gotten this far, you've already did all your pre-screening stuff in the interview. You already know that they're the decision maker. You already know that they have a bank account. You already know what their budget is. You already know who their loved one is. So at this point, it's just a matter of you going in and just assuming it. You don't have to ask, can you write it? You don't have to ask, can they start today? You've already kind of gotten all the information up front. And so as you begin the e-app process, you want to go ahead and start getting a list of the beneficiaries and start the BEC process. So you want to say, who would you like me to list as your primary beneficiary on your policy? And at that point, you want to start gathering the primary beneficiary, you want to get the contingent beneficiary, and you want to get the 2 emergency contacts. And before you get all of the information complete in the app, explain that you are going to go to in person. If anything happens, you want to know who the go-to person is if anything happens, so that way you can call that person immediately, or you're going to go ahead and call the other emergency contacts too to let them know what their role is going to be in the situation. So let them know you will be there for their client and their family, and re-emphasize that it's essential that their 4 closest loved ones know how to reach you, okay? You as the agent. That their 4 closest loved ones, so people that you know, love, and trust, and that are local folks, because we want to go see these people. We want to be able to get in front of these people, and if they're not local, then we want to be able to have a phone conversation with these individuals to be able to explain what this person has actually done and to their benefit. You want to assure the client that you will contact them and they receive your card and contact information. Let the client know that you will not reveal how much the premium or coverage amounts are. You are simply giving your contact information out so they will know what to do in case of an emergency. Call them in the home before you leave. If you can't reach them, then ask the client to call them so they'll know that you will be calling them or getting in contact with them within 24 hours to introduce themselves, to go over the steps of the planning and how to receive the funding if something happens. And so that's critical. So you want to make sure that you get the client assured that you don't need the client doing your job for you. You want to be able to explain this. Remember that getting the BECs fall under our 3 codes, our 3 rules of getting the BECs is that it's the right thing to do. Okay, it can save your deal. And then number 3 is the opportunity for you to write more deals. Okay, and you have to remember to work it in that order. It's the right thing to do. It gives you the opportunity to make more money. And then at the end of the day, it's the right thing to do. It gives you the opportunity to save your deal. And then thirdly, it gives you the opportunity to possibly make more money. So we don't want to get those out of order. We want to make sure that we're sticking with the format to make sure that we're doing the BECs for the right reasons. And then that gets you into the wrap up, which is point number 5. And after you've gotten the application, after you've gotten the approvals through the EAP process, and you're wrapping up everything, you simply want to look at completing the application in its entirety. You want to carefully look over the 7 steps, and it's crucial that you do that to make sure that you do that for the success of our agency, because the 7 steps is what keeps us systematically engaged in the right processes. Okay. Then the point B in the wrap up is to make sure that you do a quick review of the app prior to the client signing it, and making sure that, again, that it is signed in all of the areas that need to be signed. If you're doing EAPs, where you have to send the electronic signature, you want to make sure that you give them the code that's necessary so they can put in the code and they can go ahead and immediately sign it from their smartphone, from their computers, or whatever, to get it back to you. Or if you're in the home and you're doing it on a tablet or a device, make sure that once it's signed and you hit complete, that it does not just say complete, that it says successful. Successful means that everything has been ready to be submitted to the company for a final decision. And so if it doesn't say successful, that means something is not completed. So you want to make sure that you do that properly so it can be properly submitted. C, if the time allows, you want to make sure that you ask about their neighbors. Take some time to go and introduce yourself to some people. I mean, if you don't have any other appointments, or you got about an hour in between appointments, go touch base. Part of our 7 steps is to introduce yourself to 6 people in the neighborhood. If you see doors open, cars in the yard, people standing outside, you want to make sure that you introduce yourself. You want to become the premier agent for that community if possible. And if time permits, you want to make sure that you do that. And then lastly, you want to make sure that you're filling out your declining balance sheet for tracking, so that way the reporting process can be done effectively each week, so we can post your results on the first generation life GenPay leaderboard. And so folks, hopefully this audio recording will help you again to get the gist of the outline. Okay. I give you all just a couple weeks and you should be able to recite this presentation naturally. Again, don't try to be myself. Don't try to be Mr. Howard. Don't try to be anybody else that you know. Be yourself. Make the presentation who you are. Okay, this is just the information that gets you from point A to the end of the road. This is the navigation system. Okay, and so if you just follow the navigation system, we'll get you there. But you do it the way that works best with your personality. But just make sure that you're doing it, because this is how we're going to measure the successes or failures as far as what you're able to accomplish and things that you're able to generate with what you're going to accomplish in this business. And so look forward to the video portion coming out here shortly, so we can show you how to use the slides to transition with the presentation, and the slides are only effective, folks, if you know your presentation. So that's the reason why we want to put the audio out there first, so you can get some time to learn that, and then you'll be able to, here in the next couple weeks or so, be able to get on to see the video itself, to be able to use the slides as an in-home presentation. So look forward to everybody's success. Hope this, like I said, has been helpful, and we look forward to seeing you on the next training session. Take care.